now let's move on to the outer join. So we'll be applying filter criteria on queries that have outer join. So let us consider the same query. So what we will do is we will copy the same query and paste it over here. And instead of the inner join, we will now have left outer join. So once again, we will just run the query that involves the join, and you can see it gave all the rows from the left table that is involved in the query, and the left table is employee 11. So let us query the employee 11, select star from employee 11, and if you run this query, you will see that it has 5 rows which have 5 employee IDs and their respective names. And similarly, you can see in the join query you have 5 employee IDs and all their details. So the non-matching or non-existing rows that don't exist in the address table have their columns specified as null. So what happens if we say we want only the states that have CA against them? So we will run this query, and you can see it gave the similar result that we had for inner join. So you need to understand one thing, that whenever we are applying filter criteria on any of the joins, you need to consider the table, or you need to consider the result set that comes from the joining conditions as a big table. So in our example, it's a table that has 5 rows, and then we will be applying filter criteria on top of the table. So it does not matter whether you have an inner join or an outer join. You will basically get the similar results until it's an exception. And in order to understand this, first break down the result set before the filter criteria into a bigger table. Consider that as a table only, and when you consider that as table and when you apply the where condition, you are definitely going to get the concept more clearer, because in our case we can consider this as a big table that has employee ID, name, and then again employee ID, city, state as the columns. And what we want from this bigger table is we want only those rows that have CA as state against them. So there are only 2 rows that qualify this criteria, and these rows are row number 2 and row number 3. So this is how you apply the filter criteria for both inner joins and outer joins. Now there is one other important join which we use very rarely, but it's very important to understand the concept of it, is called a cross join. Cross join is basically used when we have tables that don't have any matching columns between them. So you can take an example of another department table, and department table has department ID and department name, and when you join the department ID and department name, or when you try to combine the results from employee ID and from the employee and the department table, you basically don't have any matching columns, because employee has employee ID and name and department has department ID and name. Ideally there should be a column called employee ID in the department table, but that is not the case in our scenario. So in this case, the cross join will come in handy, and it will give you all the possible combinations of the employee as well as department table. I mean, the possible combination in which the rows can be obtained from these 2 tables. And basically what it does is it applies the Cartesian product on employee and the department table. What that means is, for example, if you have 3 rows in the employee table and you have 4 rows in the department table, the number of rows as the output will be equal to 4 multiplied by 3, and that is 12. So let us now consider this example by doing a practical. But for that we need to create a table called department. So we'll write create table department. Another thing that I want to tell you from a good coding perspective is that you need to write SQL keywords in caps letter. So when I'm writing a DDL statement of creating a table, so the create table are SQL keywords, so I'll write them in caps letters, and then I'll specify the name, user defined name, and in our case we want to give it department, so the department can come in lowercase, and then bracket starts, we will have did, that would be of int type. Again, int is a SQL keyword, so that is why we have typed it in caps letter. And then name will be of varchar, and let's say that the number of alphabets in the d name does not go beyond 20. So you need to first create this table. Press F5, so the table has been created. Now we need to enter some data into it. Search into table, and we need to use you need to specify the name of the table, and you need to use the correct syntax for this. Insert into department values. So let's say department ID 1, department is HR, and copy this. I'll paste it again and paste it again, and let's say we have another department that is finance, and we have one more department that is IT. So now we will select all these rows and press F5. So we got 3 messages of 1 row is affected, one for each of the rows. Now we will select, or we will do, or we will write a query to select data from the department table. We'll press F5. So you get 3 rows. Now we'll write the query to fetch data from employee 11 table. Now you can see that there is no common column that can be qualified as a joining key if we were to include the results from both of these two tables. So under this condition, the cross join comes in handy. So you can write select star from department cross join employee. So as there is no common column or no joining key, we need not write the on close that we do in the other joins, because there is no joining key. So we just leave it as it is, and when you select this particular statement and when you press F5, you will get 15 rows. And why we got 15 rows? Because employee 11 has 5 rows and department has 3 rows. So the cross join will give us the Cartesian product, or the product for both of these tables, and which means that you'll get 5 into 3 equal to 15 rows. So that is how the cross join works. I would say we rarely use it in practical scenarios when we are working in projects, but it's good to know knowledge. So whenever there is a requirement that you need to uh, present the information in a tabular form between two tables who don't have any joining condition, then you can use a cross join. Now let's come to the last topic of this chapter, which says unmatched record queries. So as the name suggests, what we want or what we are doing, so what we have been doing till now is we are fetching only the matched records from the tables using the join clause or the joining conditions. But what if there is a requirement of uh, fetching the unmatched records or the rows? So you are given the requirement that if we consider the similar case of our tables, that is employee and addresses, that we want the employees or we want the employee IDs that don't exist in the address table. So this means that the employee ID which does not match with the employee ID that we have in the address table. So how do you do it? So whenever somebody asks you to write or to give the unmatched records, you need to first of all take the help of full outer join to see the complete result set, how it looks like when you combine the data from both of the tables. So we will write as select star from employee 11 and we'll give the alias as e full outer join address 11a on e dot employee ID equal to a dot employee ID. Now let's run this query and you can see we get the total of 6 rows, which involves some of the non-matching records from address to employee table and some of the non-matching records from employee to address table. So our main question was that we want the employee IDs that exist in the employee table but does not exist in the address table. So you can see that there are 2 rows that does not exist in the address table. So these are first and the fifth. So what we can write in this query is where employee ID. So we need to give the alias a dot because we want the records that exist in an employee table but does not exist in the address table. So we will say a dot eid is null, and when you run this query, press F5, you will get 2 rows. So these are the rows or the employee IDs that exist in the employee table but does not exist in the address table. So it's very easy whenever somebody asks you to write the query for unmatched records. First, what you have to do is you have to write a full outer join and then see the data, try to understand the data, where is the mismatch or where is and it will and by viewing the data you can completely understand that wherever the employee ID is null or wherever the column from the given table is null, you only have to fetch those rows. So if we were asked that you need to give us the employee IDs that exist in the address table but does not exist in the address in the employee table, so what you would have done in that case is you would have you would have written e.eid is null, because by looking at the data that comes from the full outer join, you can see the row number 6 has eid null, and this eid is coming from the employee table. So you just have to write eid is null, and if you query or if you run this query, you will get the corresponding employee IDs that exists in the address table but does not exist in the employee table. So I hope this makes sense. In the coming chapters, we'll dive more into the DDL statements, the DML statements. Even though we have covered the DDL statements, I think I'll just try to go through some of the topics that we left in the DDL statements, and the things will become more interesting. As always, I want you to practice along with me so that you get the hands-on working experience on SQL and SSMS. This is the only way that you will get the knowledge and you will understand the concepts involved in this SQL. So we'll join in the next chapter. Thank you.